I don't know if you can see the picture, but I'm going to read Gracie and the Christmas Star in Cedarville. This is for students learning the R. Gracie and the Christmas Star in Cedarville. It all started when, from one snowbird through another, every villager from the rural region of Cedarville had heard the word that Jupiter and Saturn, our solar system sisters, would be nearest to each other since over 800 years before. Moreover, they would be perceived from Earth as one gargantuan star that very December night. It was an astronomical discovery. All of Cedarville had already started preparing for the bright star celebration by November 31st. Perhaps, in particular, the astronomists, the astrologists, future astronauts, and the entire astro crew from Cedarbrook Elementary School had been preparing rather extra. Its members cared to share a stare at the wandering spheres through astronoculars. So, on that frigid December 24th, a group of rosy-nosed schoolchildren from Cedarbrook Elementary gathered together at the corner of Wonder Circle and Perfect Road. They all wore their warmest thermal gear, and their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and even one great-great-grandparent trailed not far behind them, while they headed together toward their town square down the road of flurry. Traffic lights colorized the frozen river of a road, creating ripples of red and green. They passed Irwin's orchard, where apples were still holding strong onto their crooked branches. The children stared up at what looked like a bright star that was radiating in the dark yonder near the crescent moon, making some of their hungry stomachs growl at the idea of ripping apart buttery layers of everyone's favorite bread from France, the croissant, like wrapping paper wrapped on the presence of eager children. It was brighter than any of the other stars in the entire studded sky. "Oh, my stars," whispered Gracie Krinkle, the shortest in the group. She was surrounded by her taller friends, so from the scrunched center of the circle, in her fingerless gloves, she tried to reach for the star as if it were hovering right in front of her, just out of reach, like from a 3D movie at the Red Cardinal Theater in town. "Reach," she thought, and she was sure she very nearly reached it with her pointer finger, but was startled when, mysteriously, it started to move. As she drew back her arm, the dark center of Gracie's large, shimmering irises enlarged in wonder as a silver star sliver hurled downward, twirling faster and closer toward them. She stared, glaring at it curiously from under the rim of her beret before it flickered, and she realized right away that, in reality, the descending star shard was really a snowflake, perhaps the most perfectly symmetrical one ever. Gracie's eyes gradually crossed as the snowflakes started circling gracefully before landing right on her forehead, squarely onto her favorite freckle. "First!" Gracie proudly proclaimed. It was her favorite number to be, as she burst into an uncontrollable shiver as if she'd been electrified by the starflake. "Agreed," her friends decreed. After the first ice crystal was a third, and then a 14th, 40th, and 400th, then hundreds upon hundreds more. Rows and rows of triangle-shaped conifers were receiving a generous powdering of powdered sugar snow. Each of the crystals sparkled brightly as they did alternating pirouettes like ballerinas on Broadway. Before they could say Jack Frost, tracking numbers no longer mattered, and what had been merely drifting turned into powerful pouring. Everything around in their surroundings became covered in snow. Pretty draping branches sparkled as they strolled carefully on the slippery road. The snowstorm had covered everything into picturesque perfection. "Courier and dives," Gracie overheard Grandpa Fuller recall, though she herself did not. The children passed the Cedarville Brook using the Cedar Brook Bridge, traversing southward like a huddle of feathery penguins in their rookery, trying to remain warm. Together, they crossed the zebra-striped crosswalk. Mr. Burrow, their trustworthy crossing guard, protected them from all directions, like he did on every other regular school day. An enormous squirrel, for a squirrel, scrambled up a nearby birch and disappeared into a crevice where nuts were stored for later. Near the town square, the group noticed Mr. Chris, the owner of Caribou Carpentry and Furniture Repair Store, was steering the reins of several strong horses he'd brought from his parents' farm. As was tradition, he was driving carriages full of passengers like his father and grandfather had over the years before him. Currently in the carriage was a friendly girl with amber eyes and braids with ruffled red ribbons from Miss Nicky Krampus' kindergarten class. Her mother wore a fur coat. When they circled around the rotunda, her younger brother grinned at a pretty fairy princess with a green wreath on her curly hair and a candelabra crown. On the corner of Circle Square Street, near the street lamp by Grizzly Bear Bakery, several other parties of quavering and quivering residents of Cedarville stood around, eager to get their turn to ride in the horse carriage. A row of larger-than-life peppermint sticks tied off with an evergreen rope garland with coral berries marked the waiting area. The entrance of the Cedarville town square had sprigs of round red berries covered in large sugar crystals draped luxuriously along the banister. At the center of the amphitheater was a grand fir tree. It was wrapped in string lights that glimmered all over. Dried citrus and paper star ornaments that had been crafted over the month of December by school children from all grade levels adorned its branches. A train track circled the tree, and an express train appeared from under an overpass running late to greet its passengers. Shivering villagers from different Bavarian streets were gathering together in groups which were forming into larger crowds of partygoers. They paraded wearing their colorful scarves in various stripes or dirndls and lederhosen. Ear-muffed children were running around the area where earlier that afternoon there had been some leftover grass. Others were rolling snow into large craters by the thrift store to create rotund soldiers that would brave any storm until the warmer temperatures would carry them off until next year. Arctic warriors from grade school built several forts in the parking lot outside Gaspar's grocery store and threw snow orbs toward each other across from their conquered territories, darting behind their forts, then sprinting to hurl another projectile. The party planners had arranged a glorious assortment of winter treats to drool over. There were fresh mandarins, fruit cake with raisins and candied oranges, and gingerbread topped with cranberry frosting for everyone who meandered by. Mary the mayor, in her crocheted beret with a pretty brooch, had a menagerie of treats sprawled out on a table near the Victorian-era courthouse, including the traditional mushroom ears in borscht. Mayor Mary remembered the gatherings from before she was grown up and wanted to create new memories with the recipes and share different kinds of treats with everyone. She offered warm, dried fruit punch to the passers-by from her grandmother's secret recipe, which she remembered by heart. Unsure, Gracie Krinkle peered through the clear crystal bowl at the dried prunes, apricots, and pears, and crinkled her red nose at the memory of her wrinkled fingers after a longer than usual shower, which the dried fruit resembled. For sport, she decided to be brave and try it first, before any of her friends had to risk it. Slurp. Could be worse, rated Gracie with a burp, surprised to learn that it tasted similar to apple cider, yet richer and even more flavorful. She even received permission to pour some extra for herself and her friends for savoring as they leisurely strolled around. First, Gracie grinned proudly. True, her friends agreed gratefully. Chipper teenagers at the craft workshop helped everyone create glittery nutcrackers for cracking uncracked nuts before roasting and sugar-coating them for various pralines for further devouring at tomorrow's indoor celebrations. Under the third grade class's paper snowflakes which were hanging over his head, Mr. Murr from the hardware store arranged red and white hard-striped peppermints onto every table as a refreshing decoration. Clear and colorful candy wrappers were recycled for reuse for art projects with Mrs. Krause. Sweet tart pomegranate seeds were sprinkled on savory platters like garnets on a royal princess's crown. Gingerbread sweethearts filled with rose-hip preserves and covered in a layer of hardened frosting were shimmering irresistibly, controlling everybody's inability to suppress drool. A popped popcorn kernel garland was draped across the rusty arbor at the entrance to the manger where the straw lay for the hungry reindeer with ringling reins. The dear reindeer were crunching orange-colored carrots and grainy sugar cubes. A furry brown rabbit with crumbles of frost on its hairy whiskers scurried in a hurry and disappeared as it buried itself into its burrow under the pristine powder. Laurel garlands were strung around the rows of chairs and ran up the great clock tower, which rang thrice more than before they first left their warm apartments. The Astro crew from Cedarbrook Elementary had brought with them everything from binoculars to star charts to astronoculars, so the villagers could travel with them, rocketless, straight out of this world without ever leaving the ground of the place of our birth, our very own Mother Earth. Where? Asked Claire in despair, an older girl from the Cedarville cheerleading troupe. There, responded Jaspar frankly readjusting her posture. Gracie adored the rhinestone-encrusted sky. The binoculars were blurry when it was her turn, so she turned the focusing ring. She tried the astronoculars next, and there, before her very eyes, was the clearest view of Saturn and Jupiter she had ever observed. Round, rotund, spherical sisters, Jupiter's storm, Saturn's rings. Together with their peers in the Cedarville choir, the Cedar Brook Elementary School children carried familiar harmonies that drifted away in flurries of crystals rising into the air on a dry drift of breeze with frankincense and potpourri. Before long, the villagers dispersed and everyone returned to their warm hearths, where under portraits from years before, the cinders that had been crackling and flickering in their fireplaces warmed up their frozen ears, nares, and back theirs. Smoke twirled and whirled from brick chimneys on snow-covered rooftops as it rose from indoors to outdoors into the freezing air. If an onlooker were to peer through the frosted glass past the window-framed children who were drawing letters and words on the frost-feathered windows with their fingers, one would adore the merry cheer in the air. Flour was dusted all over counters, rolling pins, crusty cookie cutters, and aprons, yet it was quite all right. Children were grateful for their marshmallows frothing on the surface of a warm treat they were slurping as their frostbitten fingers were unfreezing on the warmed porcelain, and grandpas read Charles Dickens and Dr. Seuss stories. Behind each and every door, everyone reminisced in gratitude of the togetherness within Cedarville, where not one Scrooge or Grinch dare arrive anywhere near trying to ruin the current atmosphere. Tuckered-out children rubbed their eyes and curled up on chairs, snoring. Fathers carried brothers and sisters over their shoulders to their bedrooms. In the Krinkle house, Gracie had already eaten the porridge and curds her mother had prepared for supper. She had curled up comfortably in her bed covers, ready to dream. "Good night, star child," her mother whispered with a kiss on her favorite forehead freckle. Gracie wrapped Ringo, her polar bear teddy bear, comfortably in her arms, ready to hibernate, while she looked forward to tomorrow's bright and early present unwrapping. She wondered if a robot, the #1 present she'd prefer, would be wrapped in wrapping paper, secured with a ribbon, resting under the tree, ready to be unraveled and ripped apart into shreds. She thought about the crowds grasping brightly sparking sparklers, the 3, 2, 1 cheers and firecrackers with a sulphury odor as the 0 hour struck when they rang in the new year last year. She wondered about what her resolutions might be for this year. Then, utter brightness as she dreamed about a star child traveling at Mach 3 across our universe toward our Earth from the rocky rings of Saturn. From Gracie's tranquil arms, Ringo Bear's circular eyes reflected the planetary star cluster through the frosty window ferns. At that very moment, something extraordinary happened. Har, 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 the spirit of our rotund and generous North Pole Ranger, to some known as Kris Kringle, to others Pell's Nickel, and more, roared heartily as he crossed across the Star Sister's reflection. A red streak trailed behind him in the flurried uproar of his trusty laughter. His red-nosed leader reindeer Rudolph was hurtling forward at the very front like a hood ornament, and was followed by Dancer, Dasher, Donner, Prancer, and all the other reindeer who were racing to deliver all their promised parcels to snoring children worldwide. The end.